Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelove, and this is Speedplay Papal States number 3. We left off with our empire essentially ready for the colonial era. We're building up a massive slew of ships in essentially just every province where we're able to. We're going to keep that up. We have just a few years left before we can really begin colonizing all of the uncolonized areas in Africa. There's just a few days before our final naval base is complete, and we'll go ahead and make ourselves a plan for our African adventurism. We also are doing fairly well in Italy, which is great news, and here we go. The first thing we want to do is secure East Africa. There's only one province that gives access to the interior, so that's going to be quick and easy enough. From there, we're going to expand everywhere we're able to in North Africa and also in the southernmost area. From there, our secondary goals are just going to be to keep going further in an attempt to seal off as much of Africa as we can. Now, how realistic that ends up being, it really does remain to be seen. We can only colonize roughly 2 provinces, maybe 3 at a time. So we are rather limited in our ability to actually project ourselves into Africa. All of a sudden something changed with our government, I'm not sure what, however it cost us essentially all of our budget. Realistically, what it most likely was is that our first group of ships just finished and we have to suddenly pay the upkeep on them. Our factories luckily are doing very well. We're going to just keep influencing them how we have been, just upgrading whenever possible. Ultimately, that should all take care of itself more or less. And now it's just a matter of sticking to our colonial plan and hopefully getting everything that we aim for and maybe even more. We've managed to make a large profit by just lowering our naval maintenance. The Germans are once again at war with the Austrians, although this time I don't believe France is on the Austrian side, so we'll see how it goes. We really do want a strong North Germany. Meanwhile, the red shirts have risen up in one of Austria's Italian spherelings. Unfortunately, they won't give us military access. I am not sure who exactly that will go towards, which is a terrible, worrying thing. We are a great power, so that should shift it to us. However, years and years ago I did play an Italy game as to Sicily's where I was a great power, and I did not get Italy in the result. Meanwhile, there is a crisis for Hungary, which would be amazing if that fires and just destroys Austria. It would really help us get our Italian core back. Ultimately, though, it looks as though everyone is joining the side of the Austrians, so that isn't realistic. We might end up even having to join the side of the Austrians just to avoid a massive war we have no chance of winning. Meanwhile, the red shirts are weirdly enough still not enforcing their demands. The North Germans took Bohemia, though, which is great news for them and therefore for us. The weaker Austria is, the better for us, and alright, the Expedition of the 1,000. It looks as though we actually do become Italy, which is the most amazing news. All of a sudden, we are just in an amazing spot. We take the decision for additional cores because, hey, it's free cores, why not? And just like that, we now don't even have to worry about our colonial power. We have tons of additional colonial power. We're still going to upgrade their naval bases, but just like that, we can expand everywhere. Just every single place that we can possibly build a colony, we can, except Djibouti. We're actually not quite fully there. Here's the new colonial plan. We'll just go and take everything we can. Pretty straightforward. And now we have to set up new national foci. We have tons of industry now, just an absurd amount. We're really going to start influencing our people to become capitalists, and for our capitalists to get enough money that they can just handle the industrial situation on their own. As now we have enough states that it'll just become rather tedious and not very helpful to manage our own industry. We will perhaps focus on building a few key industrial goods, such as late game items. Here we see we are further expanding into Africa now. We're going to not be able to expand everywhere, but just in a few key points. The main goal is going to be sealing off as much land as possible so that other countries can't even compete for it. We'll probably lose in any direct competitions. However, if we just block off areas, we don't have to worry about that. We also get an anarcho-liberal uprising. Not too concerned, though. It's a very small group. Most of our populace isn't very militant. At any rate, we continue to upgrade our factories as our capitalists are just not quite there yet. We may build very important key goods for later in the game, such as tank factories, automobile factories, telephones, really anything we need for dreadnoughts, tanks, and aircraft. We continue to spread another layer further into Africa. We compete with the British in one province, not really to take the province, just to slow them down enough that they won't actually be able to get it and interfere with the next province behind it. As I said, we're probably not going to really fight any direct competitions against other major powers, simply because we don't want to get tied down fighting in a dumb colonial dispute. Luckily for us, there are tons of dumb colonial disputes amongst all the other powers, which means we're going to be able to get even more than we really should. Also, it's about time we go ahead and build real armies for our country. Instead of these groups of three divisions, or 3 regiments and 9,000 men, we're going to build groups of 30,000 men and 10 regiments, which are actual legitimate armies that will be able to fight, really in any instance, and against Europeans, which is a key point. Meanwhile, we're spreading even further into into Africa. I'm getting ahead of myself. It will soon be Italy, but not quite yet. We cut off the entire central area, or at least we will once these protectorates are done. Now, really, the only concern is that secondary powers, and potentially even the Ottoman Empire, might get the technology required to colonize. They usually don't. Usually they're rather slow on that. So we're going to just risk that they'll get lands in the attempt to cut off legitimate empires like the British or French. And so far it's working very well. We've essentially cut off a decent portion. We are moving forward to the coastlines now, and hopefully we'll just be able to take everything. The Dutch, however, have proved to be our downfall, at least to a slight extent. They are expanding, and if they take Inner Mauritania, we'll have terrible borders. We will be cursed with terrible borders for the rest of the game, or at least until we fight a massive series of major European wars. So we're going to try to compete with them there. I did say we won't try to compete with real European powers. I feel like we can probably take on the Dutch. They only have 3 or 4 provinces with naval bases, so I can't imagine their force limits are very high at all. And by force limits, I of course mean colonial points. At any rate, we also begin to influence the remaining independent native African states. A lot of them are in the sphere of influence of the United States, weirdly enough, so we're just going to bring our influence with them up to friendly so we can lower America's influence down to, say, cordial. We are fighting the Dutch for control of Inner Mauritania. Hopefully we get that. It's really disproportionate how hard we're fighting for that land, given that it's really just vacant Sahara Desert areas. But really, I want it to be our vacant Sahara Desert areas. It will really clean up the borders and just kind of be pleasant in general. Now, we are making progress on our campaign to get all of the independent African states onto our side. Our military isn't growing as quickly as I would like. I realize in a moment that it's because we're not actually fully investing in our stockpile, as I cut that down as a cost-saving measure earlier on. There's a quick crisis that immediately gets resolved where Japan and France are fighting over northern Borneo. France wins out loud. And we're really not quite at a place where our armies are going to be ready to fight. And realistically, since our armies are being created so slowly, we probably won't be able to fight for a few years. Once, however, we do get our armies put together, we can probably afford to take on Austria, or maybe just really any European power one-on-one. We're also starting to invest in military techs, as we probably won't have the largest army, and we may be fighting coalitions or just groups of countries. So it's really for the best that we get as many advantages as we're able to. Now, apparently Austria just took over the Ottomans' position as a great power. I hadn't even realized they lost great power status to begin with, or that the Ottomans had maintained a great power status for so long, which is very interesting. Meanwhile, Prussia is now fighting Austria and France. If our armies were ready, this would be a perfect opportunity to help the Austrians. Unfortunately, we really can't at the moment. However, that's really where we're going to stop for now. When we come back, we will end the colonial era, or at least the era of colonial expansion, and hopefully get our army put together so we can fight the Austrians and take back our various cores. Thank you very much for watching.